We have an audience.
Good afternoon, welcome. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
I'll continue to add people as they join, Louise, just for your reference.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming. We'll get started when a few more people join, but thank you for coming today. Welcome. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Thanks, everyone, and welcome. We're just giving it a couple more minutes to get people in to the session. Welcome, everyone that's just joined. Thank you for coming. We are going to get started in a minute. We're just waiting for a few more people to join. Okay. Thanks, everybody. Welcome. We're just going to give it one more minute to allow people to join the session. Okay, thank you, everyone. We have about 50 people in the session so far, so we'll get started. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the Palawa as the original owners and custodians of the Lutruwita, where we're hosting this session from, and also the lands of you joining from different parts across Australia and different locations today. We acknowledge the Palawa and their spiritual connection to culture, land and water. We'd also like to pay respects to elders past and present and all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples joining the session today. Welcome and thank you for joining the session. I'm Louise Baring, the Head of Stakeholder Engagement at TasNetworks and your facilitator for today. The purpose of this session is to engage with you on the Northwest Transmission Development's contingent project application for construction costs to be submitted to the Australian Energy Regulator. We really thank you in advance for your time today. We're looking forward to your participation and answering any questions you have. Just a few housekeeping components for the session. For transparency and for those that are unable to attend today, this session will be recorded and will be available on TasNetworks' website. We have about 1.5 hours together and we'd really like to maximise that time with you and ensure we're all present and in the session. We've got a really broad range of people attending today, which we really value. And so we've got a varying levels of knowledge on the project and the contingent project application process. So a reminder that all views and perspectives are valued in this session, and we ask for respectful communication from everyone. We will have some really dedicated time for questions today after each presenter speaks. We'll also have some TasNetworks subject matter experts who'll be moderating the chat. So if a question does pop up, you're welcome to pop that in the chat and we'll get it answered by one of our subject matter experts. Equally, Andrew, my co-pilot for today, you can raise your hand and we'll draw on you for answering questions to any of the presenters, and Andrew will make sure any questions that haven't gone answered in the chat, the presenters can answer it. We'll do our best to get to all of the questions today, but if we don't, we're absolutely committed to a strong feedback loop where we'll share any questions that aren't answered today, and we'll make sure that those are shared with you and published online. I'd like to introduce the core team presenting today. Richie Sheether is the Executive Project Director for the Northwest Transmission Developments Project. He'll give a project update. We've got Matt Clark, who is our leader in large regulated investment, to talk about the contingent project application and the construction costs, along with Julie Morrison, our leader for regulated pricing, who will show you how these transmission costs will apply to customers' bill. And as you're aware, I'm Louise. I'll be your facilitator for today. In terms of an agenda, you will get an update on the Northwest Transmission Developments Project through Richie, and we'll have some dedicated time for you to ask any questions of Richie on the project. Matt, as leader of large regulated investments, will share the contingent project application construction costs, along with Julie, and some dedicated time to answer. They'll be able to answer any questions you've got. And also, Julie will provide an overview of transmission charges and how they'll impact your bill. Like to hand over now to Richie, our Executive Project Director for Northwest Transmission Developments, who will present on the project. Thank you, Richie.
Thanks, Louise. Hopefully you can hear me okay. As Louise said, I'm the Project Director for the Northwest. I've joined TasNetworks about 6 weeks ago, so fairly new to the project. Having been in Tasmania for about 20 odd years now, working on multiple projects around Australia and also overseas, it's been great to come back and work on a project locally, and one of such significance for Tasmania and the future energy landscape for Tasmania and nationally as well. So really enjoying it so far, and really looking forward to getting into it in the next few years and working through the project. So a little bit about the project. The Northwest Transmission Project, what is it? Well, it's part of the Marinus Link that you may have heard about, which is obviously the construction from Victoria across Bass Strait and connecting into Tasmania. It's being developed in 2 stages or 2 different components. There's the Marinus component, which is the construction of the Victorian component and Bass Strait. And then the second component is where it comes on shore at Heybridge between Burnie and Devonport, and the construction through to Palmerston. And that is the project we're talking about today, which is the Northwest project. It's involving the development. It was initially planned to be 1,500 megawatts worth of development, 2 cables coming across Bass Strait, and therefore requiring a fair bit of work at this end, as you can see there in the grey and the green lines. At this stage, stage 2 has not been started or is only in the development stage. So we're just looking at stage 1. So given there's only 1 cable coming across Bass Strait, it only requires at this stage 1 piece of upgraded work, which is the Burnie to Palmerston North leg, which is highlighted in green on the map there. And what that entails is effectively 2 dual 220 kVA lines, approximately about 129 kilometres in length. So that's the current plan to work on the stage 1. The reason we're doing this, people ask that question. Well, the simple answer really is that the energy is growing across Australia. There's a lot more demand coming on board, and obviously with the retirement over the next few years of a lot of coal-fired power stations, the demand is going to have to be met by other sources such as wind and solar. And part of this process is allowing that wind and solar developments potentially here in Tasmania and across Australia, along with our hydro assets that we have here, is able to move the energy from where it's being generated to where it's needed. So this link will give us a lot more robustness, able to us to do that, and also add security to our energy supply here in the state. In terms of where we're at with the project, I suppose a quick timeline. Obviously, this began way back in 2019 when the first feasibility study looked at whether this sort of approach was viable. It's progressed over the years now to the stage where we're getting towards final investment decision, which we're aiming to close out early in the new year. The current situation we're at is that the permitting process to allow us to actually build this, we're going through the permit process. We just recently went through the public submission, which is just closed. So we're now reviewing all of that feedback and working through with the Tasmanian Planning Council in relation to what conditions are required for our permit so that we can begin construction. So that's what we're working on at the moment. And then obviously we're looking to start construction early in the new year. So what would that look like in terms of the actual upgrade and the work? So generally speaking, as I said, we're looking to replace the existing 220 single line, 3 conductors, with a dual 220, basically 6 conductors. The existing towers are about 24 metres in height, so we're looking to actually increase those to about 40 metres, given we're going to have a dual supply. The green line from the previous map, if we want to just talk about that a little bit in terms of what the stage 1 will look like, it's roughly 129 kilometres in length. The bulk of it, we've tried to stay within the easements that we already have for the existing line, and about 70% of the work will be conducted within the existing easement areas. We have a little bit of greenfields work to do from where it comes onshore in Haybridge and comes through and connects to the Burnie line to Sheffield. One of the advantages of putting larger towers in and with additional height means that we can get a longer span between each tower, which is great for being able to remove existing towers. We have about 400 along that route. We're going to reduce that down to about 295, so it has a little bit less impact on the ground in terms of landowners. As part of not only putting lines up along that route, we also have to do some upgrades to the substations that accept that power. So we've got 3 substations along that route at Burnie, Sheffield and Palmerston North that require upgrade to handle the additional load. And we also have to build a new switching station to accept the power coming onto the state at Haybridge itself. Along that route, approximately 270 landowners will be affected by this route, and we've been liaising with all of those over the last few years. About 65% of it is privately owned and about 32% of it is government owned, with a little bit of forestry along that track as well. Predominantly it's cropping, grazing, irrigation set up with some urban residential up in the Burnie area where there's been some growth in that space. What will the upgrades look like? Well, effectively, apologies, I'll just move on from there. Here we go, sorry. So as part of the work we've started, we awarded a contract to our main contractor back in December 2024 to do the bulk of the work on the ground. That's been awarded to Genus, who are out of Western Australia, to come and complete this stage 1 piece of work. Since awarding that contract in December, we've asked them to do some preliminary work before construction starts. So they need to do a number of investigations to make sure that they're ready for the actual physical construction, and that's around completing the design work that needs to be done once they've looked at the sites, site investigations, looking at the schedule of how they're going to construct this infrastructure, looking at the geotech, looking at the methodology and planning and commissioning workforce, etc. So there's a lot of work been going on already to get ready for when we actually start construction. We've been talking to them about encouraging them to also register for anyone who's interested in terms of participating in this project, and they have registered. They've got a portal there for anyone who would like to contact them, and they've had some good interest there from local community contractors and skilled people. In terms of how will we construct it, well, this schedule's still moving. It's quite a challenging piece of work in terms of where it's located. So the Burnie to Sheffield and the Sheffield to Palmerston legs are quite I suppose, form quite a bit of the backbone of our transmission network, particularly through the northwest and the northeast. So we're working quite closely to manage the outages that will be required along this. There's a number of reasons for those in terms of dealing with where there's environmental impacts, bird life in terms of eagle nest times, demand on the network in terms of in the middle of winter. We've got to be careful to make sure that we manage that time frame. Also with the northwest, it gets a little bit of rain up there, so we've got to manage the right times to be on people's properties and work around those sorts of issues. So there's quite a lot of work in terms of planning how we can go about constructing this, but at this stage we're looking to start at Sheffield. And in the blue line there at the top, you can see that we'll start in Sheffield and head north up through to Burnie in the main transmission line. That will take probably around 2 years. It's quite a challenging build, that one, with the terrain and the width of the easement that we have there and infrastructure around that easement. So that will start the more difficult part first. From there, we'll later in 2027, we will start at Sheffield again and head south. This is a bit of an easier run for us. It's a bit more open, a bit flatter, and we can construct in a way that's a little bit more efficient. So we think that'll take about 1.5 years of construction, finishing around 2029. So that's the two transmission lines in terms of their timing for construction. In terms of the substations, the two most challenging are Burnie and Sheffield. So we're going to start them first, probably in mid-2026. And the upgrades to those two sites will take about 2 years. As part of working concurrently on those, about 6 months after we start work on those, we'll start work on the Palmerston and the Heybridge switching site. They again will take about 2 years worth of work, again aiming to have all those completed by before 2029. In terms of the steps, particularly in terms of the transmission side of it, just for people and the landowners, obviously working with them in relation to their property management plans that we have in terms of when we can get on site and do the construction. But there's about 6 steps overall in terms of the process. Obviously, the first up, we have to do any clearing and put in access tracks to enable us to get in and do the work at the towers and the tower locations. Once those have been put in place, we then put down the foundation for the towers and install that, depending on the terrain, what type of foundation is required. Once the foundation has been installed, we then bring in the cranes and the actual towers themselves, and they are assembled and located on the foundations. Once the towers are up, we then actually string the conductors on those towers. And then once that's done, we begin site rehabilitation, and then we move into operations and maintenance. Each tower, we think, will take between 1 to 4 weeks on site to do that work, and then we're off the property at that stage. In terms of, obviously, one of the critical factors for this project is community engagement, and we've been, as I said, since 2019 working with the communities up there. It's been fantastic, the support we've received from them, involved with we've been at a lot of the sites and show days and things like that to actually meet people and get their feedback. We have the local shareholder liaison group also established up there, which we work with. and get a lot of valuable feedback in terms of things that we need to consider and look at in terms of how we go about the project. So it's been great in terms of the feedback so far to date, and we're looking forward to continue to work with the key stakeholders as we progress through the project. So I think that was all from me, Louise. I think that was the key summary. So happy to take questions from anyone who's got any.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Richie. We will start with some valuable questions that have been submitted prior to the session. So Richie, first question we've got is sort of, how will the jobs be filled locally or internationally? If jobs are going to be filled locally, what's the current or what's currently sort of being done to build local skills and capacity so we can retain as many jobs as possible for Tasmanians?
Well, yeah, okay, that's a great question. So we, as I mentioned, the bulk of the work will be done through Genus, and they have set up a portal for people to register their interest. At this stage, we're envisaging probably 45% of on-the-ground site works will be done by locals or local contractors. Overall, as part of the requirement, we're expecting Genus to have at least 15% of their total workforce being from the north or northwest of Tasmania, depending on the skills and the requirements, of course, in terms of what we need to bring in. There are obviously a lot of on-the-ground work in terms of construction, so they're working with the local training facilities in terms of making sure that they're up to scratch in terms of anything that they need to prepare before they come on site, particularly if they're bringing on any trainees and things like that that they want to do to build the industry as well. So they're working with the local trainees organisations to prepare for the people to come through those and get upskilled as well.
And next question, Richie, whether it's true that people working on the project will need to live within 100 kilometres of the site. If that's the case, what sort of planning is underway to address housing availability, given that many workers may need to move to the northwest?
That's another good question around the workforce. So at the moment, they're looking at a couple of opportunities in terms of how they house and workforce those. Some of it will be privately supplied by the organisation themselves. Some of it will be done through living away from home allowances to allow the workers to choose how they want to locate themselves. That allows them to comply with industry requirements and also give them some flexibility, and also manage, obviously, fatigue in terms of travel around the state in terms of where they locate them. At this stage, we don't envisage them travelling any further than probably about 45 minutes or so to each site. If it's further than that, then they'll start to move to the next location of where we're constructing. So as it moves along, the workforce will move with them, particularly around the transmission side of it. In terms of, so I think that's probably the key points in terms of how they're going to address that.
Great. Thank you, Richie. I'm just going to open up now any questions from the floor. Or Adam, I see here we've got a question. Why are we wasting money on CBS, paying landholders significant compensation but not paying compensation to neighbours whose property values are significantly reduced? I think this is obviously a question around Strategic Benefit Payment and Land Acquisition Act. Richie, would you like to take that one?
Yeah, sure. So obviously, as part of the requirements to make sure that landowners aren't unfairly impacted by the project, we have a process that we have to go through. It's a legislative requirement to ensure that they are fairly compensated for any impact that we have on them, and that's a process that we've been going through with all the landowners, and we've had very good success in terms of working with them. As I said, we're trying to fit within the existing corridor, so the impact is minimised as much as we can. So we've been going through that process in terms of ensuring that they are compensated for impacts. The other side, I think, as you were asking, was about the special benefits payment process. As part of the government's approach to ensuring that we support those landowners that are actually housing this infrastructure, We are working with them at the moment to come up with and finalise the process and the payments that are due to the landowners for those components, given they are housing it. That would be something that would start once the project has been completed. So once the project is actually creating some benefits for the community, then that would be shared with existing landowners as well that sign up for that approach. So in terms of people in proximity, that hasn't been addressed in terms of, we've looked at that and said that it's slightly different in relation to wind farms and other processes, in that we're more looking at the corridor that's been affected rather than outside of that range.
Excellent, thank you. And Cynthia, I believe Adam was referring to community benefits sharing in that question. We've got a question from David. Has the specification and supply of HV conductors been finalised, and have the conductors been purchased, Richie?
That's a good question. I'm unsure at this stage if they have been. We have a number of long lead time items identified with Genus that they will be getting on and ordering. I believe those are part of them. So I'm not sure exactly when those have been ordered yet at this stage, but they have been specified. I know that.
Thank you, Richie. Just opening up for any more questions on the project update. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you very much, Richie, for the detailed presentation. We're now going to hand over to Matt Clark, our Leader of Large Regulated Investment, and Julie Morrison, to follow that, our Leader for Regulated Pricing, who will give an update on the contingent project application process. Thank you.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Louise, and thanks everyone for joining today. Good to see some familiar names and faces here today, but for those of you who I haven't met, my name's Matt Clark, and I'm the leader of the Large Regulated Investment team here at TasNetworks, which is the team that's responsible for progressing contingent project applications for our major transmission projects. What does that mean? What is a CPA as they're called? Well, CPAs are effectively the mechanism that enables TasNetworks to recover the costs required to deliver these major projects, of which the Northwest obviously meets that definition. So most of you, or some of you, may be familiar with how TasNetworks recovers our sort of normal business as usual expenditure, you might call it. So the normal costs associated with servicing our customers and providing transmission services. And that's done through the 5-yearly regulatory reset process. So every 5 years, we forecast our costs over that period and submit it to the Australian Energy Regulator, who assesses it for its efficiency and prudency and sets our allowance for how much we can recover from customers to efficiently offer transmission services. However, what contingent projects are doing, what that sort of mechanism acknowledges, is that for these very large, standalone, complex projects, it makes more sense to sort of assess those on a standalone basis. So instead of proposing them as part of the revenue reset and recovering the cost through that mechanism, they're proposed effectively during that regulatory control period. So that's the mechanism by which we recover that revenue. I should mention, for the regulatory control period that we're currently in, the 5-year period, that was what was started last year. So from the 1st of July 2024, extending through the 30th of June 2029. Because we're delivering this project during that period, we submitted a contingent project application to address the costs and recover enable us to deliver the project. In the context of stage 1 of the Northwest, which we're here to talk about today, the Northwest was staged in its cost recovery process and its CPA process. So CPA 1, which some of you may be familiar with, was to recover the costs associated with delivering effectively that early contractor involvement phase, which Richie mentioned before, that we're in at the moment, the early works phase. And the AER made a determination on those costs in March this year. That was $151.9 million net of any previously provided grant funding. So those costs enable us to effectively progress the project up to the construction phase, so progress the design and things like that. CPA 2 is what we're sort of here to talk about today. So that's covering the costs associated with construction and delivery of the project. So the remaining costs to deliver stage 1 of the Northwest. And that's what we're intending to submit at the end of this month. In terms of what's actually going to be provided from a cost perspective, so in terms of what we're forecasting in relation, what we're going to provide to the AER as our forecast cost to deliver the rest of Northwest Stage 1, that's the value that's on the screen now. So annually, provide the annual breakdown over the next 5 years, which totals 970.9 million, and that's for the construction phase. So that's incremental costs to deliver stage 1 of the Northwest, above what was approved in our early work CPA and above what's already been approved by the AER to deliver our business as usual transmission services. I will provide in the following slide the breakdown of what actually that number is made up of, the cost categories and the breakdown individually of those. But also I want to just provide a total project cost from the perspective of what we're asking the AER to approve. So if you include the CPA 1 that's already been approved, plus the 970, that's where you get to a total project cost of around 1.12 billion in real 2023-2024 dollars. So that's the cost that the total cost that will ultimately be assessed by the Australian Energy Regulator for its efficiency and prudency. In terms of the breakdown of that cost, what makes up that 970. So I will get to that in the next slide, but this just gives an overview, sort of a description of the cost categories that sort of make up the key sort of areas that build up that cost. As you would expect, the single largest is the direct construction costs, so the cost to actually get on the ground and build the substations and the transmission lines. That's incurred by the principal contractor, Genus, who Richie mentioned earlier, and that makes up about 65% of the total project cost. So by far the largest single component. There's also an allowance for risk and contingency. So it's a complex build. We're obviously still during the design phase now, so there are when you get out there and start building, there are certain things that may increase the costs. There's a probability of those events occurring, and most likely they may impact or incur additional costs. And so there is an allowance for risk and contingency that's also included in that 970.9 million. Land and property has been mentioned before, so there are costs associated obviously with acquiring easements and payments to property holders as along the entire sort of 130 kilometre route. And then importantly as well, the next 3 lines there, commercial procurement, project execution, project management, they're really the costs to fund, as you could call it, TasNetworks' costs or role in this project in managing the contractor, ensuring the efficient and timely delivery of the overarching project, managing the contractor, sort of facilitating the commercial side of things, managing the contract, all that kind of work, ensuring the technical designs are meet our standards and things like that. So those 3 costs are sort of the TasNetworks owners costs, you could call them. Also costs in meeting our obviously planning and approvals for this project as well. So there's also some dollars including in that 979 million to ensure compliance, report to the TPC, things like that. And the community and stakeholder engagement. So continue to engage with stakeholders over the period of construction. And that's also a largely, those costs are also largely contributed to the community benefit sharing program as well. So sharing those benefits with the broader community up in the Northwest. In terms of a breakdown of these costs to give an idea of what they look like proportionally and on a yearly basis, the largest, as I mentioned, was the direct construction, sitting at about 65%, with the following numbers also provided there as proportion of total cost. to equal up to the total of 970.9. I should mention as well that these costs, they did in forecasting them and including in the CPA, they did go through a very robust assessment process. So ensuring that large component, obviously, for example, the direct construction and the genus cost was subject to a competitive market tender. So that's sort of market tested cost. And other costs have also been sort of assessed through specialist independent advice, quotes from suppliers, things like that. So it's gone through a very robust process to build up that estimate to ensure that it's delivered at the only the efficient and prudent cost to deliver the project. That's the overarching cost that will be included in CPA 2. But that cost flows into revenue. So what's the AER is actually assessing, I suppose, or making a determination on when they make their determination on CPA 2 is to adjust our maximum allowable revenue, so the revenue that we can recover from customers, to account for these additional costs to ensure that we can efficiently deliver the project. So that's what they're assessing. So CPA will also include effectively the revenue impacts for the remainder of this regulatory period to deliver the project. This slide accounts for, raises something that you may be familiar with, which is how the project is financed and how that flows into the revenue impact. And that's through concessional financing. So we expect for CPA 2, as we have received for CPA 1, to receive concessional finance to deliver the remaining works associated with stage 1 of the Northwest. So below market rates, essentially, for the debt component of the financing. And that will have the impact of significantly reducing the ultimate cost paid by customers compared to if we didn't have this financing. So that will have the impact of reducing those charges. The reason why it's important in the context of CPA 2 is sort of a artifact of how the regulatory process works. So because that agreement for the financing facility hasn't yet been signed, that means the AER is not in a position to actually amend our revenue to account for those benefits just yet. So the CPA 2 will effectively include a revenue ask that doesn't include those benefits, but then as soon as that's signed, the AER will then be able to we'll adjust it and we'll be able to pass those benefits through once that agreement is agreed to. That's just worth pointing that out. The revenue that's ultimately published in the CPA probably won't reflect the final outcome, given that it doesn't reflect the concessional financing. However, for the purposes of this engagement and purposes of transparency with the revenue and the pricing, which Julie will talk about fairly soon, we have included the indicative revenue impacts that include sort of a range of what the potential concessional finance outcome will look like, or what we expect it to look like. So if we go through this table line by line, that first row is effectively what you might call our baseline revenue. So that's the revenue that we would recover to deliver our current or existing transmission services. So the 5-year period, that's what's on the screen there. That's the baseline. So that's what we can already recover in order to deliver our services. The next line is the impact of early works. So as I mentioned, the AER has already made a determination on that, and we have signed a concessional finance agreement for that. So that line there is the revenue for those early works costs with the concessional finance agreement taken into account. I should note as well, the fact that this only goes to 28-29 doesn't mean that that's when it stops. It's included out to 2028-29 because that's what the AER ultimately amends. They amend our maximum allowable revenue for this existing regulatory period because we won't have an updated determination until the next period. So we can only provide revenue outcomes in the CPA for the existing period. The final line there is the construction component. So what those costs that I was mentioning before lead to from a revenue perspective. And that's the range that's provided there. So in 27-28, the 4 to 5.9 million, and in 2028-29, the 5.3 to 8.6 million. And that's the range of what the concessional financing outcomes we expect to look like. And the last line there is sort of the percentage increase year on year as a consequence of that revenue. So 27, 28, 8.5 to 11.8% increase in revenue from the previous year. And similarly in 28, 29, 6.6 to 7.7% increase in revenue. So that gives an idea of, and I should also mention these are in millions of dollars and nominal. So real, including when you take out inflation, probably be a fair bit lower, but these are provided in nominal in millions of dollars. I'll go to questions in a minute, but I'll just provide the next steps from a CPA perspective before we get to how that revenue flows into actual customer bill impacts, which Julie will talk about. So the CPA, as I mentioned, it's sort of a propose and respond framework with the AER. So we'll submit our CPA 2 at the end of the month, which will include those costs that I talked about earlier. The AER will then assess those costs for their efficiency and prudency to ensure that those costs are in the interest of customers and things like that. And they'll make a determination at a later date, and that determination may reflect the value that we've concluded, or it might include a lower value. So in terms of timing of that, it's a little difficult to provide an exact date. It's obviously something that we work with the AER to understand. But under the rules, under the National Electricity Rules, once we submit a CPA, the AER has 40 business days to make a decision, with the ability to extend up to 100 days. However, that's from the date that they receive the latest information they need to make their decision. So when we submit at the end of October, they will now say that they need more information to provide. They need more information in order to make their decision, and ask us questions. And then the 40 business days starts from the date in which we provide the last bit of information they need to make their decision. So it's a little bit hard to say exactly when that determination will be. But when they do, that's when our maximum allowable revenue gets adjusted and is ultimately flowed through into customer prices. And yeah, so the intention is that we would have that determination prior to commencing construction. That's an overview of the CPA. Louise, if you take control, and we can go to any questions.
Thank you so much, Matt, especially for that really informative presentation. We do have a question that was previously submitted prior to the session. So, Matt, how will the Australian government 346 million GST-free grant, how will that be utilised to manage costs to customers?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and certainly acknowledge in the past few months, certainly been various announcements and media around Project Marinus and Northwest specifically, especially when around the financial investment decision was made on Project Marinus. And that obviously included this announcement around a grant from the Australian government, which was intended to effectively mitigate those impacts to customers. So I should flag here that the information provided in this pack, both from the revenue cost side and the pricing side, doesn't consider what that impact of that grant would be. And that's really due to the fact that it was announced quite recently, and the mechanism for how that is ultimately flowed through to customers to ensure they get the best value out of it is still being determined. So unfortunately, I don't have a clear-cut answer where I can say it's going to have this impact exactly, because that's still under consideration. But you would obviously expect that grant consistent with the intention, what I understand it's intended to do, will flow through to mitigate some of the price impacts that Julie will talk about in a minute. What I can say is that it's not at this point in time, or we don't plan on at this point in time simply netting that off the underlying capex of Northwest, which is why it's not included in that 970 million. So that $970 million doesn't include that grant. And the reason why it's not, as I said, it's not, the mechanism is yet to be determined, and whether that's actually the best way to get the value out of it for customers, because obviously the intention is to maximize the benefits from that. So wish I had more to say on how that grant is ultimately considered, but for the purposes of the CPA and this presentation, it hasn't been considered.
Thanks, Matt. We do have some other questions as well. One from John. So the current RAB for transmission in between 1.75 and 2 billion, with a regulated revenue stream of around 800 million over the regulatory period, what impact will the CapEx of around 1.2 billion have on both the transmission RAB and also the revenue needs?
Yeah, good question, John. So I think the revenue slide I sort of flagged addresses how that flows through to revenue, noting it was only for this regulatory period. So the revenue obviously continues beyond that. It is CapEx. So as I mentioned, it's although it isn't included in our 5-yearly BAU RAB, which sort of is rolled over at the start of each regulatory period, it will have the impact of effectively increasing our RAB from the next period. So it sort of is rolled in that regard to the RAB, and that obviously has an associated revenue impact and pricing impact. Hopefully that answers the question.
I think it does. And John, feel free to pop something in the comment if you need further clarification. We've got a question from Jill just around how will stakeholders be able to accurately assess the CAP2 through the AER consultation process when stakeholders and the AER won't have access to the details of the concessional financing from the CEFC? And ultimately, does this mean there will be a further update on the CPA to accommodate the concessional finance?
Yeah, great question. So firstly, on the broader AER consultation process, so when we submit the CPA, generally what the AER do is they will sort of open it up for submissions and things like that, which is what they did for CPA 1. So there will be an opportunity, obviously, for stakeholders to provide more formal feedback to the AER on our submission, and including any issues that they want to address. In terms of consultation on the details of the concessional financing agreement, so I would expect that once we have a bit more information about what that will ultimately look like, we'll sort of have another one of these sessions to sort of say, this is what the range we previously articulated to you all was. Now that we've worked through a bit more with how that looks like, I would expect to sort of have another one of these sessions potentially to say, this is what was ultimately agreed to, this is what the pricing is looking like. And that might be part of the annual pricing process or something like that. But I do think there would be opportunity from a TasNetworks side to engage broadly on what that impact on prices ultimately ends up looking like. So so that last point, I do think there would be further updates as the concessional financing agreement progresses further.
That's great. Adam's got a question around just with the 85 million, does that include the SBP, which is referencing the strategic benefit payment, even before it has been finalised?
Yeah, good question. So the 85 million doesn't include the SBP. So the SBP would be on top of that. Ultimately, whatever's agreed to and announced by the government, that would be in addition. So what's included in the CPA 2 only reflects the capital expenditure, effectively ask to deliver the project to Marinus commissioning. With the SBP, we expect that to be basically commence from the start of the next period. So at the moment, the project practical completion of the project effectively lines up with the end of our regulatory period. So what that means is that there is some cost, with the SBP being the main component here, that falls into the following period, and that will be a recurring expenditure. So it'll be treated as operating expenditure. So what we plan on doing at the moment with the SBP is that following the announcement of what the final value is and any sort of legislatory requirement that requires us to pay that SBP, that would be treated as effectively an OPEX cost in the following regulatory period. That's how we would be proposing that to the AER on how it would be applied. But no, it's a very good point to acknowledge, Adam, that no, the 85 million that for land and property does not include the SBP. That's more the legal payments required to acquire easements, rather than any additional payment to landholders.
Any other further questions for Matt before we move on? Thank you so much, Matt, for the detailed presentation, answering all the questions and clarifying a number of points there. Wonderful. We will move now forward to Julie Morrison, our Leader of Regulated Pricing, who's going to give an overview of the transmission charges. Thank you, Julie.
Thank you, Louise. Thank you, Matthew, for the introduction through revenue. I'm Julie Morrison, and I'm the leader of the regulated pricing team. What that means is that we're responsible for pricing both the transmission and distribution networks here at TasNetworks, both doing the annual pricing and helping with the pricing of modelling. Matthew has given a very good introduction on the way the revenues are flowing into the pricing area. And in the following slides, we will provide indicative impacts of the charges that we see resulting from those revenue flows of the contingent project application. We have noted that there are some uncertainties in doing these pricing. Some of those relate to the negotiations around the concessional finance arrangements. So we've provided a range of outcomes in this pricing to show what that may look like, noting that they may differ in the end on how they're presented, but TasNetworks is committed to passing on the benefits of the concessional finance arrangements when they are agreed. Also, those government announcements over the last few months, as Matthew said, they haven't been included. We're still working through the way those mechanisms work, and any benefits from those are not in the pricing outcomes that we're about to present. The base figures that we are going to use will be around our 25-26 annual charges. We have updated those to reflect AEMO's update for their cybersecurity pass-through. But before we do start on the pricing, we did want to just give you an overview of how the pricing works with both the transmission and the distribution networks. We do have the transmission network, they get priced first. We've got both direct connect customers and the distribution network connected to the transmission network. Those direct connect customers, they make up some of our generators we have in the state, as well as large major industrial load customers. And the distribution network, which residential, small business and some other large businesses are connected to, take up to or contribute about 60% of the revenue for transmission. When we look at distribution customer pricing, distribution customers contribute to both transmission and distribution prices, or the revenues associated with that. And the transmission component of that is roughly about 20% approximately for those residential small business customers. And it should also be noted that in that distribution network, there's a large number of customers for those charges to be shared amongst, which sort of changes the impact that some customers may see to their annual charges. We have, when we talk about charges also, we've got the typical residential bill, and we just wanted to clarify before we go into the pricing that we're talking about the network component today, the network component of the total charge that a residential customer may see in their energy bill. So for that, it's approximately 44% of a customer's bill at present. We do note that Marinus Link and APA with regards to Basslink do talk about the total benefits a customer may receive as a result of these activities. That is accounting for all these other components that flow into the bill as well. But today we're just talking about the overall network component. When we're talking about or looking forward on those future prices, we are assuming CPI to be more aligned to the 2.66%. We have also been engaging or will be engaging with our major industrial customers to discuss these individual indicative pricing outcomes as we go through them. The pricing that we will show will also include 2031 and 32, which is to reflect the price impact or the charge impact that customers may see as a result of the commissioning of this project. So it goes a little bit beyond the revenue flows that we had previously discussed. So this slide is showing the indicative aggregate charges for our major industrial customers. This is in real terms. All our charges will be shown in real terms. And we've shown the base charges in the green bars, which is based on the most recent annual pricing updated for that cybersecurity with AEMO. Plus we see the range of the concessional outcomes that our major industrial customers may experience. By 2031-32, based on the information we have and the concessional financing arrangements we've modelled, we may see impacts between 16 to 24% within that range from the current base. But this is prior to the application of the government's announcements and the finalisation of the CEFC. For our residential and small business customers, those pricing impacts, because it's a portion of the total charge that we're seeing coming through, is slightly smaller. And these are based on average annual consumption that we expect our typical customers to experience. So for our residential customers, we assume 7,834 kilowatt hours over the year, and it is based on a peak off-peak split of 30 and 70%. We expect the indicative impact by that 31-32 year to be around about 3 to 5%. with a minimum impact of around 2 in years leading up to that, up to 28, 29. And we do see the same sorts of impacts for our typical small business, assuming an average consumption of 33,500 kilowatt hours over a year. That concludes the pricing outcomes relating to charges. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks so much, Julie. Really a lot of detailed information on the price impacts. Open to the floor now. Any questions for clarification or anything further you want to know from the pricing point of view? One from John. Julie, are we doing impact assessments for other than the average customers?
Yes, John, we are looking at doing that. We've recently undertaken a segmentation of our customers in TasNetworks. We're currently undertaking modelling to apply that across the customer base. Once that comes out, which we're expecting it at the end of the month, we will be looking at pricing for those particular segments across TasNetworks. So yes.
Any other questions? Andrew? Andrew, you've got your hand up for Julie. Go ahead if you're able to come off mute.
Can't hear Andrew.
Still on mute, Andrew.
Sorry, Andrew. We'll see if we can unmute you.
Yes.
Oh, got you now. Go ahead. Thank you.
Yeah. Julie, Andrew Bowen. Just a question. What contingency, if any, is being put in the proposal if there's a major, one or two major industrials on the transmission side, that load disappears?
Sorry, I can't quite catch the entire question.
So Andrew's question was, what sort of contingency have we got in there if there's any major industrials, if they lose load or no longer in the picture? Andrew, is that correct in terms of your question?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Great question.
Yeah, great question, Andrew. For the modelling we've presented today, we've not assumed any loss of load on our major industrial customers. TasNetworks does keep in touch with those major industrials quite closely, and we're continuing to work with them to understand the impacts that this has across their businesses.
Great. Thanks, Julie. Open to the floor again. Happy for you to raise your hand or type in the chat. Okay, we're going to move forward to Julie's second part of her presentation and sharing information. And Julie's now going to give a bit of an update on and building that sort of understanding of the coordinating network service provider role for TasNetworks and other transmission charges. Thanks again, Julie.
Thanks, Louise. And I did just notice another question pop up.
Oh, sorry, John,
Hugh.
of course. So sorry, we'll go, we'll just remain in question time. So Hugh, there is no sensitivity analysis when someone like Boyer is threatening to close down?
Not within this pricing. No, we've not done that within this realm of modelling.
Can I just step in for a moment? Sorry, this is Sandra Tao. I'm currently the leader of the Revenue Reset here at TasNetworks, and I guess just wanted to discuss, I guess, the purposes of the pricing is to provide what the indicative outcomes look like compared to the baseline of what today is. So it's about demonstrating compared to today, what is the incremental change that a customer might experience? So as a business, as Julie said, we're working very closely with our major industrial customers. We are certainly looking at sensitivities around our major industrials in terms of our day-to-day interactions, but for the purposes of the contingent project application that we're submitting to the AER, we have had to make some assumptions around what that baseline scenario looks like, so that we can then project, everything being, similar as it is today. This is what it would look like for a customer in the future.
Thanks, Sandra. I think that gives more sort of broad context as well, just adding on to what Julie said. Just wanted to triple check with John's question around, will we see a revenue breakdown for Northwest TD along with the lines of figure 13 in the combined proposal?
To be honest, John, I'd have to go back and have a look at that chart, the combined proposal, and we'll go
testing
back
our memory,
to
John. I did just bring it up quickly. It looks like it's a graph that basically shows how revenue is built up from a building blocks approach year on year. I think that's the figure you're referring to, John. So what's provided in the CPA at the moment, and we could add a figure, it does provide effectively a table that includes the value of how revenue is built up. So those of you not familiar, revenues, I didn't go into it in my presentation, but revenue's built up on a building blocks basis. So the sort of different components that make up how revenue is derived, and that is included, like how we've derived those revenue numbers is included in the CPA2 submission. So if that's the figure you're referring to, John, something similar will be in the CPA.
Great attention to detail there, John. Adam just has a question around, look, we know that MI, so major industrials, get cheaper generation costs. Do they also get cheaper transmission charges?
No, the transmission pricing methodology is very prescribed and it must follow the approved methodology from the AER. And we must follow what's in the national electricity rules in calculating those charges.
Excellent. Thanks, Julie. I think we might move to your next component of the Coordinating Network Service Provider presentation. And thanks everyone for the really engaging, interesting questions. Happy for you to, we welcome them, keep them coming. Over to you, Julie.
Thank you, Louise. We did just want to briefly touch on our change in role as Basslink may be becoming regulated. And we wanted to talk about the likelihood of TasNetworks being appointed as the coordinating network service provider should APA, or Always Powering Ahead Group, choose to convert the Basslink interconnector from a market network service provider to a transmission network service provider. The AER did approve the ability for APA Group to make that conversion. They are obviously working with the AER on their revenue proposals right now. And if they choose to convert, they will convert on the 1st of July 2026. In the event that they do choose to convert, that means that TasNetworks as a TNSP will likely become the coordinating network service provider for the Tasmanian region. And what that means is that we will be required to collect the revenue on behalf of all other TNSPs within Tasmania. We have a couple of charts in this slide, which basically just shows how revenue is currently collected from TasNetworks' point of view. So currently 88% of the transmission revenue is recovered through prescribed transmission services. 12% is recovered via AEMO in the form of infra-regional settlement residues, modified load, export charges. With the prescribed transmission revenue, we get 6% of revenue from some generators, around 52% comes from distribution, and we have major industrials contributing to that revenue as well. Should the TasNetworks become a CNSP, we will see a change in that mix. So APA's revenue will be recovered. It will likely be recovered as TUOS related or transmission use of system, locational and non-locational charges. We're still working out what the makeup of that might look like, and we're working with APA on that. But the consideration we have here will that for the first time, Tasmania will receive inter-regional settlements residues, which may change the way that mix looks. So instead of AEMO being 12%, we will likely see that increase. We are working through the impacts of that, and we have engaged some consultants to help us come up with what those forecasts might look like and understand how that moves. We do know that both Basslink and Marinus Link have some of their determinations out there, and that their expected revenues in nominal terms are $428 or nearly $429 million. APA has proposed in their determination to recover 25% of that from Tasmanian customers, and the 75% will come from Victoria. Their modelling, excluding the impacts of settlement residues, indicates that's an extra $22 in transmission charges for residential customers. And we are expecting a final determination from the AER on the 27th of February next year. With Marinus Link, they submitted their revised proposal in July 2025 for their Stage 1 Part B, their construction, and they will be providing updates to their proposal. Well, they have provided updates to their proposal on the 17th of October. Their proposal covers costs for the regulatory period 1 July 25 to the end of June 2030. And Marinus Link won't be able to recover revenue from customers during that regulatory period. They are also progressing their concessional finance arrangements with the CEFC, and the benefit or the impact of that benefit won't be apparent until 2030-31. Their proposal has indicated that the price impacts of that connection will be about $47 per annum for residential customers. And again, we're expecting their final determination in February next year. I do know I've got a question there from John. Will TasNetworks net out the interregional settlements before determining consumer charges? Yes, that will be required under the rules. Yes, that will be netted off. I think the challenge we're working with at the moment is understanding the quantum of what that might look like.
Julie, also just when we answered Adam's question a little bit earlier about major industrials and their kind of transmission charges, Adam just wanted to clarify, so in terms of major industrials, they'll have the same per kilowatt hour as residential customers? So initially
no,
Adam asked, yeah.
So I'm trying to understand the question, sorry.
So when we answered Adam's question around Adam's initial question was, we know major industrials get cheaper generation costs. Do they get cheaper transmission costs or transmission charges? Of which your answer was no. There's a really strong framework around that. And so Adam was sort of saying, well, thanks. So is it the same per kilowatt hour as residential in terms of charge?
The charging frameworks are different between residential and those major industrial customers, because the major industrial customers pay for transmission only because they only use the transmission network. Residential customers use both the transmission and the distribution networks. So the transmission charges flow into the distribution networks for the revenue to be recovered from both transmission and distribution revenue recoveries. So they will differ. Also, some of the differences relate to transmission customers will pay charges based on where they're located, whereas residential customers, there's no disadvantage to where you live, so there's no locational component in their pricing. Everyone pays the same across the state, irrespective of where you live or how far away you live from a substation. So very different frameworks under which those charges are determined.
Excellent. And John just wanted to note that as an aside, and for the interest of those online, even though the proposal is for a 25-75 split, when you consider the current drafts, the actual revenue recoveries after allowing for inter-regional settlements is closer to 50-50. I don't know if you wanted to have a comment on that, Julie.
Closer offline. Thanks, Louise.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for Julie? If not, we're going to circle back to Richie. Okay. Thanks so much, Julie. Richie, we just had a few questions that we wanted to come back to you for answering. Adam had a question earlier around an initial question of devaluing neighbouring properties. Are we compensating greenfield land areas at a higher rate than existing? And just kind of understanding, are we sort of devaluing neighbouring properties, and do we have that fair compensation in place?
Okay, yep, okay, good question. So at the moment, the processes that we're working under is the Land Acquisition Act. That's the process that we work through with landowners that are impacted by the infrastructure. And as part of that act, we have to value the impact on the property. So there's a set process that is required to go through in terms of getting valuations done of the impact, also allowing the landowner to have an opportunity to get fair valuation as well, and to come to an agreement on what that compensation should look like. So in terms of dealing with the impact on the properties, that's the process that we go through. So whether it's a brownfields property or a greenfield property, the valuation process is still the same and takes that into account. So all landowners are treated the same way in that respect. So that's in relation to that. And under the Land Acquisition Act, that deals with only landowners that have infrastructure within their properties, not adjacent landowners or anything to do with that. So that's the framework we're working under at the moment in terms of compensation for landowners.
Tony also just had a bit of a follow-up question to that around what percentage of landholders, Richie, are yet to agree to the compensation payments? And if there is no agreement, will land be compulsory acquired?
So in terms of just to be clear, we talked about the special benefits payment, which is a separate proposed separate process, which I think Matt covered off as well in terms of that being dealt with and paid later in the project. In terms of the access and the land acquisition process, in terms of valuation and the easement process, we have about 80% of the properties now agreed to that process. So there's about 20% left of the landowners to work through in terms of getting that final agreement in place. And some of that relates to finalising the special benefit payment that we're hoping to get addressed very shortly. And once that's done, we believe a number of those will then be comfortable enough to sign once they see the total compensation process. Any remaining landowners, we're obviously working with them as closely as we can to go through that. Compulsory acquisition is not something we want to go through, and I think the government and the management here do not want to go down that process unless we really have to. So, to date, we're looking at over the next few months to really work with the last few landowners that we have to try and address any concerns they have. Some of them we think we can work through in terms of addressing those. So, at this stage, we're not looking to use compulsory acquisition. Obviously, as the project progresses, if we do have a few left at the end that require that process, and that may be necessary.
Thank you. And Tony, I suppose this is just a follow-on from the question you answered before around Adam and compensating nearby landholders. Tony's just kind of asking, will that policy of not compensating nearby landholders be reviewed?
I don't believe so at this stage. I think the current process is that we're just dealing with the landowners that are affected. So I haven't heard anything to say that that policy will be reviewed at this stage.
And just noting, Adam's just put in the chat around Tas farmers and neighbours want neighbours or nearby landholders included in the strategic benefit payment, which, as I understand, you've sort of answered that, Richie, in terms of out of scope for
Yes.
the Land Acquisition Act and the strategic benefit payment.
Correct, yeah.
Thanks, Richie. Just opening up for further questions from the floor. We've still got all our experts in. Andrew, happy for you to come off mute.
Thank you. Yeah, this is a question for Richard. There was some talk in the original part of the Northwest Transmission 1 and 2 that there would be a social licence clause for the contractor, that any amenities like camps, etc., that were constructed would be left for the community. Is that still the case, or has that now changed?
I'm unsure on that particular, as I said, I've only been in the project a few weeks. I can certainly follow up on that. I suspect that there would be some social licence around that, but I can't answer that at this stage. I'm sorry, Andrew.
Andrew, we can come back to you on that one. So just so we're clear, any camps or etc., anything as a part of
Fantastic.
Social licence being given back to communities, just so that we're clear on your question.
Not a problem. Fantastic.
Yeah, I think if you're talking about camps at this stage, it's not envisaged that we will be building camps given the resources that were required. As I mentioned before, I think there'll be a number of privately provided accommodation from the contractor and some of the living away at home for allowance. So at this stage, we're not envisaging camps per se, if that's the specific question, but general social licence we can follow up on.
Thanks, Andrew. Opening up to the floor, anything else in the chat, or if anyone wants to raise a hand. We've got Richie, Matt and Julia also online, as is Sandra. We do have a question in here from Greg. Probably this is a good one for you, Richie. How many contractors on site are expected to be expected?
On site? Well, I guess there'll be
workforce,
total workforce I think peaks at about 360. Obviously that's blue and white collar workers. We're expecting probably on average about 200 or so during the period. But of course they'll be spread out across multiple sites. So there's no one site with our workforce. We'll have people located at the substations working on those, and people also working at Haybridge and also working on the transmission lines heading north and south. So I can't give you the exact numbers on what's at each area. But yeah, they'll be spread out across that whole area.
Welcome and invite any other questions, or if anything needs clarified. We've got lots of great experts on the call. Another question from Tony. Can you please go through the changes to the size of the towers? Just a refresher on the size of the towers.
Yes. Okay. So currently the line that we're working on is a single 220 line, and the average height of those towers is about 22 metres or so in height. Given we're putting in an additional 3 conductors to double the size of that network, the size of the towers will fluctuate anywhere from 40 odd metres up to about 59 metres in height, depending on where they need to sit in terms of the terrain as well, and what we're trying to cover in terms of distance between towers. So we're moving the location around, trying to get the best fit for where we can locate towers in relation to landowners, to try and accommodate that, which means we will be changing the size a little bit, but they'll vary from sort of low 40 metres up to about 59 metres.
Okay, great. Excellent. Thanks, Tony. Tony's happy with that one. A few more minutes, team, before we wrap up. Richie, able to give us a bit of a background on Genus as managing contractor?
Yeah, sure. I can give a bit of background on them. So Genus are based out of Western Australia. They began, as I understand it, working for the Western Australian Networks business, doing contract work to the line business over there. And then they've expanded their business to be nationwide now. They're actually listed on the Australian Stock Exchange, so you can have a bit of a look up and find any details you like in terms of their published information there. They are working across Australia. They're doing work on some of the other transmission network projects around Australia at the moment as well. So yeah, they're a growing workforce. I think they have over 1,000 or so in their workforce at the moment, multiple jobs across Australia. Excellent.
I think we have time for perhaps one more question if anyone's got anything that they feel is unanswered or something clarified. Okay, like to thank all our presenters today for all their detailed information and answering all of your questions. Really appreciate the time and participation. We've had some really detailed questions that have helped kind of shed light on a few things that people were unclear about. So on behalf of TasNetworks, really thank you for your time. We really appreciate your involvement. In terms of next steps, you'll receive a copy of this webinar recording, and it will also be published online. I believe that we have answered all questions today except the one I've noted around Andrew and just a bit more detail on social license. So we'll make sure that that's shared and also published online. We have a short survey that will be provided to you, so you can give us feedback on how you felt the webinar went. We're really open to constructive feedback, and in the spirit of continuous improvement, really encourage your feedback on the session. If you've got any additional questions, or in reviewing the materials provided, have a question for the project, you are more than welcome to contact us on major projects. info@tasnetworks.com.au. You can email that team directly and we'll make sure that we give you answers to any questions or provide clarification around next steps. Thank you so much again to all our presenters and for your great participation today. Thanks for your time and have a wonderful rest of the day. Cheers, team. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
You.
Thanks, team.
Well done, Louise. Well done, Julie and Matt and Richie.